Have you ever loved someone so deeply that letting them go felt like losing a part of your soul? But somehow, in the silence that followed, you began to hear your own voice again. Stay with me, because this isn't just another love story. It's about a girl who loved quietly, let go courageously, and found something far more powerful than romance. She found herself. If you've ever been torn between love and self-respect, if you've ever had to choose between your peace and your passion, this story might just change how you see everything. Her name was Ilara. She wasn't the loudest in the room. She didn't chase attention, and you wouldn't find her dancing in neon lights or shouting her dreams to the world. Ilara was still water, calm, collected. She smiled often but spoke rarely. People mistook her silence for passivity. But Ilara wasn't weak. She was watching, feeling, thinking, and like many of us, she fell in love. His name was Kian, charming, magnetic, the kind of person who draws others in effortlessly. Where Ilara was quiet, Kian was stormy. Where she planned, he improvised. He lived on impulse and his world spun fast. Maybe too fast. They met in college by accident. Isn't that how the best stories begin? A dropped book, an apologetic smile, and a conversation that lingered too long. What started as curiosity turned into comfort. Kian saw Ilara's quiet strength, and Ilara was drawn to the fire in Kian's eyes. He made her laugh, pulled her out of her routines, challenged her stillness. She grounded him. He lit her up. But here's where the story begins to turn. Love, no matter how passionate, is not always peaceful, and peace, no matter how necessary, is not always easy to choose. In the beginning, everything was beautiful. The dates, the long walks, the stolen glances. But with time, Ilara began to feel a growing imbalance, not in their love, but in their values. Kian wanted more risk, more chaos, more extremes. He lived for the highs but couldn't sit with the lows. And Ilara, who had always turned inward during life's storms, found herself exhausted trying to keep up. He'd vanish for days chasing opportunities, wild ideas, or adrenaline. She waited. She reasoned. She forgave. Again and again. Until one night something shifted. It was raining. The kind of rain that makes silence feel louder. Kian was late. Again, no calls, no texts. Ilara sat by the window, her fingers curled around a cup of now cold tea. She wasn't angry. She wasn't even sad. She was still. In that moment, she remembered something her father once told her. Quoting Marcus Aurelius, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this and you will find strength." That night, she stopped waiting. She didn't scream. She didn't demand. She didn't threaten to leave or beg to be seen. She simply stood, walked to her room, and began packing, not to punish him, not to flee, but to return to herself. You see, Ilara had been practicing stoicism without realizing it. She had endured. She had chosen calm over conflict. But that night she understood that endurance wasn't the same as acceptance. Stoicism isn't about suppressing feelings, it's about understanding them. Not reacting to pain, but responding with purpose. And the most stoic thing she ever did was walk away from someone she loved. Kian came home to an empty apartment. A note lay on the table. 4 lines handwritten in black ink. "You're fire. I'm water. I need peace, not passion. This isn't about love. It's about who I become when I'm with you." He called, he begged, he apologized. But Ilara didn't come back, not because she stopped loving him, but because she finally started loving herself. And that's where the real journey began. In the weeks that followed, the silence was unbearable. She doubted herself. She questioned everything. But every morning, she sat with her journal. Every day, she wrote what she felt. Not to dwell, but to release. She read Epictetus, Seneca, Marcus Aurelius, not because they offered escape, but because they mirrored her pain with wisdom. She realized something profound. You can miss someone and still know they're not right for you. You can love someone and still choose peace over passion. You can let go and still be whole. Friends asked why she didn't fight harder. Family whispered that she was too cold, too distant, too proud. But Ilara didn't explain. She had learned the art of silent strength. She took up pottery, traveled alone, took long walks with no destination. She didn't post pictures, didn't broadcast her healing. She simply lived it. And Kian, he moved on, or tried to. But every once in a while, he'd send a message. "Miss you. Remember when? I wish things were different." Ilara never replied. Not out of spite, but out of clarity. She had let go, truly, deeply, Because sometimes the most powerful act of love is release, not just of the person, but of the version of you that clung to them. That's what Stoicism is. It's not about being emotionless. It's about choosing your emotions, owning your choices, holding your heart gently, and still choosing peace even when passion screams louder. Ilara didn't just lose someone. She found herself. Weeks turned into months. The ache in Ilara's chest didn't disappear overnight. Healing never works like that. It doesn't come with trumpets or banners. It comes in quiet waves in the mornings, when you wake up and realize you no longer reach for your phone to see if they texted. In the nights when you no longer cry into your pillow, but just breathe and let the stillness hold you. She began to notice things she hadn't before. The way the light fell through her window at 7 a.m., the warmth of a good book, the simple joy of walking barefoot on grass. It was as if her soul, long silenced by longing, had started speaking again. One day, sitting alone at her favorite cafe, Ilara overheard a couple arguing. Loud, heated, dramatic, the kind of argument that would have once torn her apart. She watched them, not with judgment, but with calm detachment. She sipped her coffee slowly and thought, I've been there, but I don't belong there anymore. That's when she realized something most people never do. Peace isn't found in the absence of pain. It's found in the decision not to be controlled by it. You see, Stoicism isn't some cold, emotionless armor. It doesn't mean you stop feeling. It means you stop being ruled by those feelings. It's the difference between being in a storm and becoming the storm. Ilara wasn't made of stone. She still remembered the way Kian used to look at her when she laughed. She still remembered the way their hands fit together like two puzzle pieces. But instead of longing for the past, she started learning from it. She wrote a simple rule on the last page of her journal. Don't chase what unsettles you. Don't romanticize what drains you. Don't return to what you had to heal from. And then, something unexpected happened. One evening, months after their last goodbye, Ilara received a package at her door. No return label. Inside was a book, her favorite novel, one she'd once lent to Kian. Tucked inside the cover was a note. I finished reading it finally. I get it now. No name, no plea. Just that. She smiled. Not because he finally understood, but because she no longer needed him to. That's the thing about self-growth. It's invisible. No one sees the nights you cried alone, the days you forced yourself out of bed, the thousand silent battles you fought with your own thoughts. But one day someone returns and says, I finally see what you meant. And all you can do is smile, because they're late. Not out of cruelty, but because they took a different path. One you no longer need to follow. Ilara kept the book, not as a memory, but as a symbol. Not of love lost, but of self-reclaimed. She went on to change her life, not dramatically, not in an overnight epiphany, but one small decision at a time. She changed jobs, moving into something that aligned more with her values. She spent weekends volunteering at a local shelter. She reconnected with childhood friends, people who saw her not as a broken heart, but as a whole human being. She started seeing a therapist not because she was weak, but because she was brave enough to explore her own depth. She studied Stoicism more seriously now, not just in theory, but in practice. One lesson that stayed with her was this: if you want to be strong, learn how to be alone. Ilara didn't fear solitude anymore. She embraced it. She even started planning a solo trip to Greece, where she hoped to visit ancient ruins and walk the same streets where Epictetus once taught freedom of the soul through discipline of the mind. She began writing too, a blog, anonymously at first, sharing pieces of her story, weaving romance with reflection. The blog grew slowly, then suddenly, people resonated with her honesty. They wrote in saying things like, I didn't know it was okay to walk away from someone you love. Your story gave me the courage to choose peace. I thought I was broken, but I just hadn't found myself yet. Ilara never claimed to be a guru. She didn't sell self-help. She simply shared, gently, quietly, powerfully. And in that quiet, her voice became louder than it ever had been in love. Then came the day she met someone new. It wasn't like the movies. No whirlwind romance. No sparks flying, just a conversation. Deep, honest, calm. His name was Aaron. He was kind, reflective, and had been through his own version of heartbreak. They talked about books before they talked about dreams. They shared silences without awkwardness. And when he asked her about her past, she didn't flinch. She told him, I let someone go once. Not because I stopped loving him, but because I finally loved myself more. And he simply nodded. No judgment, no fear, just understanding. That's when she knew she wasn't searching anymore. Not for someone to fix her, not for someone to complete her, just for someone who wouldn't cost her her peace. Because the greatest love story she'd ever lived was the one with herself. By now, Ilara had learned to live with the silence and then to love it. She no longer needed loud answers to quiet doubts, no longer needed validation from a world that changed its mind every other day. In the space that once begged for love, she built a foundation of self-respect, so strong that nothing fleeting could shake it. And that truly was the essence of Stoicism. Not the avoidance of emotion, but the mastery of it. Not detachment from life, but full participation, without being enslaved by outcomes. She understood this more clearly than ever when she lost her job. It wasn't dramatic, just a polite restructuring, an email, a closed door. A year ago, it would have broken her. She might have cried, spiraled, questioned her worth. But this time she paused. She walked out of the office building with her shoulders back, holding nothing but a box of books and her favorite coffee mug. She didn't text anyone. She didn't vent online. She just went home, made tea, and opened Marcus Aurelius's Meditations. Her eyes landed on a line she had underlined months ago. Choose not to be harmed, and you won't feel harmed. Don't feel harmed, and you haven't been. She whispered it aloud and then smiled. Losing the job wasn't an insult to her value. It was a redirection, a clearing, a push towards something more aligned. And sure enough, within weeks, an old contact reached out, offering a freelance opportunity that paid more, gave her flexibility, and let her write full-time. But more than the job, what mattered was the grace with which she had handled the loss. That was growth. As time passed, Ilara's relationships evolved too. She no longer begged to be understood. She didn't chase conversations that went dry, or cling to people who offered only crumbs of affection. She stopped explaining her boundaries and simply held them, not with cruelty but with clarity. It was in one of these moments that she reconnected with Mira, a childhood friend. Mira had always been fiery, an emotional volcano. Quick to love, quick to anger, quick to retreat. They had grown apart in college, but now, over coffee and years of unspoken memories, Mira looked at her and said, "You've changed." Ilara tilted her head. "How so?" "You're calmer, like nothing shakes you anymore." Ilara smiled. "Everything shakes me. I've just learned how to stay standing." Mira laughed, then paused. "I wish I had that." Ilara reached across the table. "You do. You just haven't met that version of you yet." That's when Ilara realized how deeply the philosophy had embedded itself in her bones, not just as knowledge, but as lived wisdom. She was no longer reacting to life. She was responding to it with intention, with patience, with power. And yet the old ghosts hadn't vanished completely. One rainy afternoon, Ilara saw Kian again. It wasn't planned. She was at a bookstore browsing through a stack of poetry. When she looked up, and there he was. Same storm in his eyes, same familiar stance, but something in him looked worn. He noticed her at the same time. "Ilara," he said softly. She nodded. "Kian." They talked, briefly, politely, the way old lovers talk when time has stitched shut the wounds. But the scar remains. He told her he'd read her blog, that her words haunted him in the best way. She thanked him. Nothing more. Then he asked, "Do you ever think about us?" She looked him in the eyes, not cold, not cruel, just still. "I think about the girl I was when I loved you, and I hope you find someone who doesn't have to leave to find herself." He blinked, and for the first time perhaps he understood. They didn't hug. No numbers exchanged. No promises of keeping in touch. Just a parting glance, a quiet goodbye that needed no words. Because closure isn't always a door slammed shut. Sometimes it's just peace. In the months that followed, Ilara's writing deepened. She wrote essays about control and surrender, about heartbreak and self-respect, about the beauty of loving without possession. She wrote not to preach but to process. Her most read post was titled, "The Day I Stopped Trying to Be Enough for Someone Who Was Never Empty." It went viral. People sent messages from every continent, men and women, teenagers and retirees, all saying the same thing in different words. "I thought I was alone in this." And that's what Stoicism taught her most of all, that while pain is universal, suffering is optional. That freedom begins not when we avoid life's wounds, but when we stop letting them define us. Aaron read the post too. One night he turned to her and asked, "Do you still believe you made the right choice?" Back then, she paused, then nodded. "I didn't know it at the time, but yes." Letting go of Kian was the beginning of everything real. He smiled. "Then I'm grateful you did." Alara wasn't perfect. She still had hard days, still wrestled with doubt, with fear, with longing. But now when the storms came, she didn't resist them. She sat with them, listened, learned. Because stoicism wasn't a shield, it was a mirror. And in that mirror, she saw the clearest version of herself. Whole, wounded, wise, and still standing. She had let him go. And in doing so, she had found the only person she was ever truly meant to keep. Months later, Alara stood on a cliffside in Santorini. The sun was setting, spilling gold across the Aegean Sea. The wind moved through her hair, gentle but persistent, like a reminder. She had come alone, not to escape but to arrive. She pulled out her journal, the one that had seen her through every unraveling and rebirth, and wrote a final line beneath pages of doubt, discovery, and truth. "I let him go, and in the space he left behind, I built a home inside myself." She didn't cry. She didn't ache. She just smiled, quietly, inwardly. Behind her, a new chapter waited. Aaron, perhaps, a deeper calling in her writing. Maybe more silence, maybe more joy. Whatever came next, it didn't scare her. Because for the first time in her life, Alara wasn't looking to be held. She was holding herself. And that was enough. With that said, thanks for watching, and until next time.